The alien queen laughed at the human's weak body until he carried her through a war zone alone. The throne room of Queen Thalzari was massive, shining with golden metal and glowing crystals. Alien nobles from across the galaxy stood on both sides, dressed in long robes, their faces proud and cold. In the center of it all, sitting high on a throne made of black stone, was the queen herself. Her skin was silver blue, her crown tall, her voice smooth but sharp like a blade. She looked down at the human who stood before her, small compared to the tall alien guards beside him. His name was Jack, a soldier from Earth. He wore a simple black uniform, his arms crossed, his face calm. He did not bow, he did not speak unless spoken to. He was here as part of a peace escort team sent by the Terran Alliance, but now he stood alone, his team waiting outside. The queen raised one brow and smiled slowly. "So this," she said, her voice echoing, "is the human warrior they send to protect me." The nobles laughed, loud and mocking. One of her generals, 8 feet tall with red armor, snorted. "He looks like he would break if I sneezed near him." More laughter followed, echoing like thunder in the great hall. Jack said nothing. He simply looked around the room, scanning exits, noting guard positions. His face stayed blank, but inside, he was alert. Something felt wrong, like the air itself was waiting to snap. He could smell fear underneath the queen's perfume and the cold metal scent of the palace. The queen leaned forward, eyes glowing faintly. "You are brave, little human, or maybe just foolish." She waved her hand. "We are done here. You may leave and tell your masters I do not need such weak things to guard me." Jack's lips twitched slightly, almost a smile. He nodded once and turned to walk toward the exit. But then it happened. The ground shook just a little at first, then a loud boom followed, and the walls trembled. A crystal chandelier crashed. Down behind Jack, screams filled the hall as guards looked up, confused and afraid. A second explosion came. This time closer, dust fell from the ceiling, cracks spreading like spiderwebs. A soldier ran through the side door, shouting, "Your Majesty, the rebels have broken through the outer wall. We must evacuate now." Panic took over the noble guests. Some ran for the doors, some shouted orders, others simply froze. The queen stood up quickly, her proud face now pale. Another blast shook the palace, and this time, part of the ceiling collapsed, stone and metal rained down, crushing part of the hall. A heavy beam fell near the queen, making her stumble backward. Her guards rushed to her, but not fast enough. Jack was already moving. He ran forward, grabbed the queen's arm, and pulled her out of the path of falling debris. The queen stared at him in shock, dust on her face. What are you doing?" she gasped. Jack didn't answer. He pulled her close and moved fast toward the back exit. Another explosion hit this time. The lights went out, replaced by red warning glow. Sparks flew from the walls. Alarms screamed across the palace. Jack held the queen's hand tightly, dragging her through smoke and chaos. Guards were shouting, but no one seemed in control. As they reached a lower hallway, the queen looked back at the throne room, now filled with dust and fire. She was breathing hard, her heart racing. Jack finally stopped near a sealed metal door. He tapped a hidden panel, and it slid open, revealing a dark stairway leading down. "How did you know that was there?" the queen asked, still shaken. Jack finally spoke, his voice steady. "Scan the layout before I entered. Emergency exit tunnel. Leads to the old supply hangar." The queen blinked, surprised. "You studied my palace?" Jack nodded. "Earth taught us to prepare for every outcome, especially when allies are proud and enemies are nearby." She looked at him closely now, not as a joke, not as weak. He was calm in the storm, strong in the chaos, and he had just saved her life while her own people had failed to act fast enough. For the first time, Queen Thalzari didn't laugh. She followed Jack down the stairs, unsure of what waited below. But now, she no longer doubted the human beside her. Not even for a second. Smoke followed them down the narrow stairway, thick and choking. Jack moved fast, one hand holding the queen's wrist, the other on his sidearm. Behind them, the sounds of falling stone, screaming voices, and more explosions faded slowly. But the silence below was worse. The queen's breath was sharp in her throat, her steps uneven on the metal stairs. She had never been underground before, not like this. Not as a runner. The tunnel walls were old, with cracked panels and flickering lights. Every few meters, the lights buzzed and went dark, then lit again with a dying glow. Jack stopped once to listen, his hand raised. He heard movement above too. Many footsteps, fast and wild, not palace guards. The queen opened her mouth to ask something, but he placed a finger to his lips. They kept going, deeper into the lower halls. The air grew colder, and the floor was slick with moisture. Suddenly, a loud crash came from above, and part of the ceiling behind them caved in, blocking the path they came from. The queen jumped, instinctively stepping back. Jack grabbed her arm again and pulled her forward. "No going back now," he whispered. Her pride was quiet now, replaced by something else, uncertainty. Minutes later, they reached a metal bulkhead with a heavy locking wheel. Jack spun it slowly, his muscles tense, and pushed the door open. It groaned like a dying beast and revealed a massive underground storage bay, dark, wide, and full of broken crates. Old supply drones lay scattered in pieces. Long forgotten, dust floated like ash in the beam of Jack's wrist light. The queen stepped carefully behind him. "This is your plan?" she asked. Softly, "No, this is just step one," he replied, scanning the shadows. "Then what is step two?" He looked at her, eyes calm. "Get out alive." A noise echoed in the distance, metal clanging, followed by whispers in a language Jack didn't know. He knelt behind a stack of crates and motioned for the queen to do the same. She crouched beside him, her silver blue skin glowing faintly under the light. She looked strange here. Not royal, not powerful, just tired. Jack pulled out a small scanner from his belt, tapped it once, and frowned. "There are 3. He muttered. "Maybe 4, armed, moving slow, not palace guards." The queen stiffened. "Assassins?" Jack nodded. "Or rebels." He looked around quickly, then spotted a vent shaft half covered by a fallen pipe. "Come on," he said, crawling toward it. She hesitated, looking at the tight space, then back at the darkness behind them. With a quiet curse in her own language, she followed. Inside the shaft, the air was thick and smelled like oil and mold. It was just wide enough for them to crawl on their stomachs. Jack moved first, slowly, carefully, his hands guiding him through the narrow metal walls. The queen followed, her robes catching on sharp bolts, her crown scraping the top. At one point, she grunted in pain as something cut her arm. Jack stopped, twisted around, and whispered, "You okay?" She nodded, but her voice was low. "This is not what I expected when I woke up this morning." Jack chuckled quietly. "Welcome to the human experience." They reached a small grate overlooking the old docking tunnel. Through the broken windows, the outside world could be seen: burning skies, broken ships, black smoke rising like towers. Rebel tanks moved through the ruins, followed by foot soldiers. A dogfight blazed overhead as two aircrafts spun in fire. The queen stared, eyes wide. "They've taken the city." Jack didn't speak. He reached into his belt pouch and pulled out a folded map. It was hand-drawn, messy, but detailed. He pointed to a small dot just beyond the hills. "There's a comm station there, old tech. If I can reach it, I can call for evac." "We," she said suddenly. He looked at her. "We can reach it," she repeated firmly. Jack gave a small nod, then moved to unscrew the grate. Behind them, a whisper echoed down the shaft, cold and close. Jack froze. Someone else was in the vent. He pushed the grate open fast, helped the queen down, and jumped after her. No time to explain, no time to breathe, just run. And so they ran into the smoking world beyond. The queen, once seated high on a throne of power, now moved with a human who did not look back. He had no crown, no guards, no armor, but somehow, in this burning nightmare, he had become her only shield and her only hope. Night fell fast on the burning world. The sky above the ruins turned dark red, smoke hiding the stars. Jack led the queen through broken roads and shattered stone arches. They moved through the edge of the jungle, where the air smelled of ash and wet leaves. Each step was slow, careful, silent. The queen tried to keep up, but her injured leg made her stumble often. Jack didn't say anything, but each time she fell behind, he slowed his pace. Soon, The sound of engines passed overhead, enemy drones, dark and shaped like metal birds, searched the ground with red light. Jack pulled the Queen into a trench, deep and muddy. They waited, their bodies still, breath held. The red beam passed just inches above their heads. When it faded, Jack stood, then turned and crouched beside her. "You're slowing down," he said, voice soft. She nodded, breathing hard. "I think I twisted something." Jack looked around, then knelt in front of her. "Climb on," he said. She blinked. "What?" "I'll carry you," he repeated, not looking at her eyes. "No," she whispered. "That's not right. You want to live." She paused, then slowly nodded. He turned his back toward her, and with shaking arms, she wrapped herself around his shoulders. She was taller than him, but he lifted her like she weighed nothing. Her breath was warm near his ear, and he could feel her heart pounding through her chest. Jack didn't speak, didn't stop. He just walked one step at a time through the smoke and mud. Branches slapped his face, thorns scratched his arms, and still he moved forward. Behind them, distant gunfire echoed like thunder. For a while, the Queen said nothing. Then she whispered, "Why do you do this?" Jack answered simply, "Because I can." She rested her head on his shoulder, silent. No one had ever carried her before, not even as a child. Suddenly, a sound came from the trees. Not a machine, not metal, but animal. A long, low growl. Jack turned quickly, hiding behind a tree with the Queen still on his back. Through the thick jungle mist, glowing eyes appeared. One pair, then two, then four. Creatures of this world twisted by war and hunger now hunted in packs. Tall, four-legged beasts with armored skin and blade-like tails. Their mouths dripped with black saliva, and their growls grew louder. Jack lowered the Queen gently to the ground and raised his rifle. "Stay behind me," he said. She didn't argue. The beasts moved closer, slow and careful, eyes locked on the human. Jack fired one shot. It hit the first creature in the eye and dropped it instantly. The others roared and charged. He moved like a ghost, left, right, dodging claws and teeth. The Queen watched in silence, shocked at the speed, the focus, the skill. Jack didn't waste bullets, didn't miss. By the time it ended, 3 beasts lay dead, and the last one limped away into the fog. Jack turned back to her, blood on his face and uniform, still breathing. He asked. The Queen nodded. You fought like a machine." Jack wiped his face. "No, machines feel nothing." He picked her up again and continued walking. Her eyes stayed on him the whole time, wide and thoughtful. They reached a broken bridge stretching over a dark river. The supports were cracked, pieces missing. Jack stepped carefully, testing each part with his boot. The wood creaked and bent under their weight. Halfway across, a sharp snap filled the air. The plank below his foot gave out. He fell to one knee, still holding her. She gasped and grabbed his shoulders. "Let me down." "No," he growled, forcing himself up. He took another step, then another, each one a struggle. And finally, they reached the other side. Jack set her down beneath a stone outcrop. His breath was heavy, arms shaking. The Queen looked at him not as a human, not as an alien, but something else, something stronger than anything she'd known. "I misjudged you," she whispered. Jack didn't reply. He just watched the flames in the distance, eyes steady, then quietly said, "We rest here for an hour, then we keep moving." And the Queen, once ruler of thousands, gave a simple nod. The Queen woke up to silence. For a moment, she forgot where she was. No throne, no servants, no guards, only damp stone beneath her back and the sound of slow breathing nearby. She turned her head and saw Jack, sitting at the edge of the clearing, rifle across his lap, eyes wide open. He hadn't slept. The jungle around them was too quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind. That kind of silence meant only one thing: something was nearby. Jack raised a hand, motioning for her to stay still. Then he slowly stood and disappeared into the shadows. The Queen's heart beat faster, unsure if he'd return. Every second felt like a minute. Suddenly, a soft thump came from the trees, followed by a low hiss. The Queen pressed her back against the rock, her hands shaking. But then Jack returned calm, covered in green dust, carrying something in both hands. He dropped it near her feet. It was a rebel scout, unconscious, tied with strong fiber cables. He was watching us, Jack said quietly, not alone. The Queen stared at the alien's uniform dark gray, marked with a red claw symbol. She knew that sign. They're hunting me, she whispered. I should have known. Jack nodded, yeah. He pulled out a blade from his boot and cut a strip of cloth from the rebel's gear, then used it to wipe his face. We have to keep moving. But from now on, we stay off paths. They traveled deeper into the wilds, past broken roots and ancient ruins covered in moss. The Queen limped, her leg worse now, her breath short. Jack didn't speak much, only used hand signals and soft clicks to warn her when to stop or move. 3 times they saw patrols, and 3 times they hid until the danger passed. The rebels were getting closer each time. By nightfall, they found shelter under the skeleton of a crashed shuttle, its body half buried in the mud, glass long shattered, metal twisted inside. Jack set up a trap at the door and checked his rifle again. The Queen sat beside a broken control panel, staring at nothing. After a long silence, she asked, "Do you fear death?" Jack looked at her for a moment, then shook his head. "I respect it, but I don't fear it." "Why not?" "Because I've faced it too many times to be scared now." She nodded slowly, thinking about his words. "I used to think fear was weakness," she said, "but now I think it's just part of being alive." Jack didn't answer, but the way he glanced at her showed he agreed. Later that night, a sound woke them both. The trap had been triggered, but no alarm went off. Jack moved like lightning, gun ready, eyes sharp. He stepped outside the shuttle and found a figure lying just beyond the wire. It was another rebel scout, but this one wasn't dead. He was shaking, clutching his side, wounded. The Queen stepped beside Jack and looked down at the man. He was young, barely more than a boy. Jack raised his rifle, but she grabbed his arm. "Wait," she said. "He's just a messenger," she added. "Look at his patch. Yellow stripe means courier." Jack lowered the rifle, but stayed alert. The boy looked up with terrified eyes, and in a weak voice whispered, She must die, they said if I failed. My family." Then he passed out. Jack searched the boy's gear and found a small transmitter. He smashed it instantly with a rock. "They know we're close," he muttered. The Queen's hands were trembling, but she hid it well. "They won't stop until I'm dead," she said. Jack looked her in the eyes. "Then we won't stop moving." As dawn came, they walked again, slower now, deeper into unknown lands. But something had changed. The Queen, once protected by walls and armies, now walked through danger beside one human, and that human, small and broken-looking just days ago, had become the one thing standing between her and death. Each time she fell, he picked her up. Each time she froze in fear, he moved forward without pause. And when she looked at him now, she didn't see weakness. She saw fire, the kind that refuses to die, no matter how dark the night gets. The cold hit first. They had left the jungle behind, crossed into open land burned by war. It was called the Dead Plains, once a farming zone, now a field of ash, ruins, and forgotten bones. No trees, no cover, no shade, only cracked earth and broken machines half sunken into the ground. The wind was dry and sharp, slicing through Jack's clothes. He adjusted the Queen's weight on his back. She was barely conscious. Her fever had gotten worse, her skin cold and her breathing faint, but she still held on, arms weak around his neck. He whispered, "We're close, just a little longer." Jack's boots crunched over glass and metal shards. Each step sent pain up his legs, but he didn't stop. In the distance, barely visible, stood a thin tower, black and rusted, the old comms station. Still untouched. If the signal booster still worked, he could call for help. If not, they'd both die out here. A drone passed overhead, slow and scanning. Jack dropped to the ground instantly, covering the Queen with his body. The red beam swept across the plain, then moved on. He waited, holding his breath, until the hum faded. Then he stood up again and kept walking, one foot in front of the other. Time passed without meaning. The sky above turned orange, then deep blue. At one point, Jack fell to one knee, body shaking. He could feel blood running down his side where shrapnel from the jungle had cut deep. He looked at the Queen, her eyes barely open now. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Jack reached into his pouch and pulled out his last emergency stim patch. He slapped it onto her neck, watched it pulse with a soft green light. It would give her a little time, nothing more. Then he stood again and kept moving. He didn't care about pain anymore, only about distance. They reached the calm's tower just before dark. It stood on a small ridge, its shadow long across the dust. The doors were stuck, rusted shut. Jack slammed his shoulder into them again and again until the hinges cracked and they fell inward. With a scream of metal, inside, the air was thick and still, filled with dust and silence. He laid the queen down on a broken control bench. Her lips were dry, her eyes barely focused. "Stay with me," he said, touching her face gently. Then he moved to the old terminal, pulling wires, flipping switches. The power was dead, but the manual crank still worked. He grabbed it and began turning it, over and over, each spin sending a pulse of power to the system. Lights flickered, then screens glowed faintly. A signal icon blinked on, red, then yellow. He connected his comm link and spoke. Voice rough and broken. "This is Sergeant Jack Holt of Earth Command. Requesting emergency evac. High priority. Royal passenger wounded. Repeat, Royal passenger wounded." No reply. He repeated the call, again and again. Then finally a crackle. A voice answered. Distorted but clear enough. "Received, Sergeant. We have your location. 20 minutes out. Stay put." Jack dropped the comm link and sank to his knees, breathing hard. He turned to the queen she had heard it to, a small smile on her lips. "We made it," she whispered. He nodded, crawling to her side. But then he froze. Footsteps, outside. He grabbed his rifle and stood, body low, through the doorway. He saw them, rebels, 4 of them, moving fast across the plain toward the tower. They had tracked the signal. Jack locked the doors, pushed heavy metal crates against them. Then he looked at the queen. She reached out and touched his hand. "You've done enough," she said. "You don't have to fight alone." He shook his head. "Yes, I do." The first blast hit the wall, shaking dust from the ceiling. Jack raised his weapon, eyes locked on the entrance. One man, one gun, protecting a dying queen. Outside, the war still burned, but inside that tower, Jack stood like a wall, and if death wanted her, it would have to go through him first. The first bullet punched through the wall and whistled past Jack's head. He didn't flinch. He aimed low and fired once, then twice. One scream followed, then silence. Smoke filled the small room, mixing with dust and sweat and the sharp scent of old metal. The queen tried to sit up, but her arms wouldn't respond. Her body was too weak now, too drained. She could only watch him, this human who refused to fall. Jack ducked behind a fallen beam as another explosion rocked the tower. The rebels were using grenades now. He knew what they wanted. It wasn't just about the queen anymore. It was about pride, revenge, and making a message out of her death. But Jack wasn't about to let that happen. He grabbed a small EMP charge from his belt and tossed it out the shattered window. The device hummed once, then flashed blue. Outside, to enemy drones dropped from the air, sparks flying from their metal shells, but more were coming. He could hear footsteps closing in, fast and heavy. He turned back to the queen, his voice low. "They'll breach the door into minutes." Her eyes met his, full of sorrow. "You should run." He gave a tired smile. "That's not how I was raised." She tried to speak again, but her throat was dry, so she just nodded, and a single tear slipped down her cheek. Jack leaned over and placed a small beacon beside her head. "It'll keep scanning for medevac," he said, "even if I don't make it." Then he stood and faced the entrance, rifle gripped tight. His fingers were cut, his arms bruised, one leg shaking slightly from exhaustion, but his eyes were still clear, still sharp. He was ready. The door burst open in a cloud of fire and smoke. Shapes moved through the chaos fast, armed, shouting in a language the queen couldn't understand. Jack moved before they could see him. He rolled to the side, fired into the fog, dropped one attacker, then another. He took a hit to the shoulder and spun backward but stayed on his feet. Blood poured down his arm, but he didn't stop. His body was breaking, but his will held strong. From her place on the floor, the queen could see only flashes, light, fire, shadow, and Jack, always in the center of it. A man who looked like he should have fallen long ago. A man who kept fighting when every rule said he should be dead. Then, suddenly, silence again. The smoke cleared slowly. 3 rebel bodies lay in the room, and Jack stood over them, chest rising and falling like thunder. He dropped his rifle. It was empty now. His other hand clutched his bleeding side. He turned to the Queen and forced a smile. "Still alive," he whispered. She tried to respond, but the words didn't come. Instead, she reached out her hand. Fingers trembling, he knelt beside her, grabbed her hand gently. They sat like that, quiet, side by side, as the tower creaked and the air grew colder outside. Distant engines roared. A shadow passed over the tower window, bigger than any drone. The Queen blinked once, slowly. Then she saw it through the broken roof. A sleek black shuttle descending, lights cutting through the smoke. Jack looked up, barely able to lift his head. "Evac," he said with a cracked voice, "right on time." Soldiers in white armor stormed the tower a moment later, shouting orders, scanning faces. A medic rushed to the Queen and injected her with a stabilizer. Another knelt beside Jack, trying to lift him. He pushed the man away weakly. "Help her first." As the Queen was lifted onto a stretcher, she looked back at Jack. He was sitting against the wall, eyes closed, body still. For a second, she thought he was gone, but then his fingers twitched. She let out a shaky breath and whispered something the human medic didn't understand. But Jack, even half-conscious, smiled faintly. He had done it. He had carried her through fire, across death, through pain, not because he was told to, but because it was right. The rescue ship rose through the smoky sky. Inside, the Queen lay in a medical bed, soft blue lights pulsing around her. Machines whispered beside her, checking her vitals, healing her slowly. She stared at the ceiling, but her mind was still. Down there in the ashes, in the tower, beside him, across from her, Jack sat on the floor, strapped into a support seat. His armor was torn, soaked in blood and dust. Medics had treated his wounds, but he refused the bed. He said he was fine. He wasn't, but he was awake. She watched him silently for a long time. His eyes were closed, but he wasn't sleeping. His fingers twitched every few minutes, like he was ready for another fight. Even now, up in the sky, far from danger, he stayed alert. When the shuttle reached the orbital base, the hangar lights glowed bright. Soldiers snapped to attention as the Queen was rolled out. News had already spread what had happened. Who had saved her? Not her guards, not her army, not her generals. A single human, Jack, walked out slowly behind the med bed, limping, his face calm. He wasn't smiling. He didn't wave. He just stood still as they looked at him, these aliens with polished armor and shiny metals. None of them had gone into that fire. He had, later, at the Galactic High Chamber. The Queen stood before thousands. Her skin had healed, her robes glowing with silver light, but her voice was different, lower, quieter, stronger. She spoke of war, of betrayal, of loss, and then she spoke of him. She raised one hand, and Jack stepped onto the stage. He wore a simple black uniform, torn but clean. The chamber was silent. No one laughed now, no one questioned his presence. The Queen turned toward him, then did something no one expected. She knelt. Gasps filled the room. The Queen of Zari, kneeling before a human. She spoke without shame. "This man carried me through death, through fire, through fear. I laughed at him once," she said, "because I could not see past his body. But he showed me something I have never seen in any warrior. Not power, not weapons, will." Jack looked at her, eyes soft. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. That moment was broadcast across the stars. On Earth, people watched and cheered. On alien worlds, soldiers stood still, silent with respect. The image of a kneeling queen and a silent human burned into history. Later, far from the cameras, in a quiet garden aboard the royal ship, the Queen sat beside Jack under a tree of glowing leaves. She held a cup of warm liquid in her hands. He sat across from her, arms folded, one eyebrow raised. She smiled at him. "You never bowed to me," she said, teasing. "I carried you." He replied, "That's better than bowing." She laughed softly, not with pride, but with peace. And for the first time in her long life, she felt truly safe, not behind walls, not under armor, but beside the one man she had once called weak. The human who refused to break.